Welcome back to I Taught English Abroad. And as is always the case when I get to speak to Thomas Kerr, I'm delighted. I'm very, very happy, and I'm in a great mood today. Ed has joined us before in the podcast to talk about his life and career. And I'm delighted to bring him back on to talk about what makes a good TEFL teacher. His expertise and experience in the industry, I really couldn't ask for a better guest. And now I've sufficiently buttered you up, Thomas. How are you today? How's Spain?
Yeah, fine. Good considering it's a Monday, but yeah, fine. Sun's starting to shine. Nice day. Yeah, everything's cool. Great. Great start to the week.
Excellent.
I'm
And how
happy.
are we talked a little bit about your pets last time, and just for anyone who listened to your episode, just a quick update on how they're all doing.
Six cats, six dogs, two cats, and a new tortoise. We've adopted a tortoise who's in
Mhm.
hibernation, but they're all fine and doing really well.
Excellent. I love to hear
Just trying to get them not to bark, so they're all
that.
here, calm.
That's the trick, isn't it? It doesn't matter how many you've
Mm.
got. I mean, we've just got the one cat, and whenever he's really quiet most of the time until you press record or you're in a meeting, and all of a sudden, you know, the one man choir starts. For anyone who shamefully hasn't listened to your previous episode, your route into English teaching, if you can sort of kind of briefly synopsize that for us. How did you get into TEFL?
Kind of just chance, really. I think, like a lot of people. I mean, I lived in London for years, kind of lost my job there, and thought, what next? And just turned up in Spain. I thought I'll come here for a holiday. And I just kind of stayed and really enjoyed it. And I stayed because I started teaching English. Because what happened was I was kind of looking for work, couldn't find anything, and when people heard me speak in English, they just approached me and said, "Hey, are you an English teacher? Do you do private classes?" People just came up to me in bars and stuff. And not that I go to a lot of bars, but a couple of times. And they were, and friends, people get introduced to people, and then suddenly I had two, three, four private classes, and that's just got into it naturally.
And later on, you would do the qualifications that you need. You've become an experienced TEFL teacher. You've got more qualifications than you can shake a stick at. You also help to shape the courses that we teach at TEFL Org. You've been involved with the company for a long time now. But what was your kind of moment of realization early on when you were kind of taking those ad hoc, if you like, those was there a moment when you thought, okay, I can do this actually. This is something that I could probably do long term.
I kind of knew straight away. I mean, I
Right.
went into it just went bang. I just,
Hmm.
well, I was really nervous going to the first one because I had not a clue. There was no kind of internet though
Hmm.
then, and so you couldn't watch a class or know what was happening. And I had no idea what to expect. So I just went in with an open mind, with nothing prepared, and I just
Hmm.
thought, I'll just don't know what to do. And went in, and the girl was really lovely, and she started chatting and told me what she wanted to do, and because she told me what she wanted to do and what she wanted to learn, and I listened to her and kind of corrected her a little bit on her English because that's what she wanted. And even though I didn't know any of the grammar, but I corrected her in my way, and that was it. And I left, and I just loved it, and I just thought, am I getting paid for this? This is like great. This is really fun. And I just got the bug. And the more I did, the more I realized I needed to learn and know to help my students, and just continued to love it. I just loved it. And it just has never been like work. It's always been something that I've really enjoyed doing.
Hmm. Was there anything from previous jobs or any experiences that you had, or it was something in terms of, looking after people or kind of experience that you had that you consciously brought to teaching where you thought, okay, maybe I could do this because I've done this? Or was it straight into kind of the deep end of like, there's nothing from my life beforehand that I can bring into teaching, but I know I could be good at this? Like, was there anything that you kind of brought into that sort of first lesson with you?
Definitely, excuse me, with the first lesson, I mean, I worked in a bank. I've done lots of different jobs
Hmm.
before I did TEFL. Worked in banking, worked in import export, and I also worked in bars and restaurants. And
Hmm.
I'm going to say that working in bars and restaurants really helped,
Mm.
because that contact with the customer and having a bit of fun with them, a bit of tongue in cheek sometimes, and that helped me a lot to create a rapport with the students and make classes fun and upbeat for students. And I think that helped me with the first couple of classes, to go in there and smile, how are you, and just be friendly and happy with them. And that was a big help for me.
Mm. Definitely, and kind of just to extend on that a little bit, when we talk more sort of generalities, review what kind of emotional skills a person develop before they kind of get into the teaching sphere. What do you think is essential in terms of emotional intelligence to be not just a TEFL teacher, but any kind of teacher?
Emotional intelligence, I think you have to, empathy, kind of try and understand your students a little bit of how people work, how people think. I mean, I remember one time I had a class of 6 students, and there was this lady, it was here in Madrid, and there was this lady, and she just talked Spanish all the time. She wouldn't stop talking, but just about anything. And she was kind of, and I didn't know what to do, and I kept saying, can we speak in English? But she kept doing it, and she was a really lovely, lovely lady. And I thought, what am I going to do here? And I had a chat, afterwards. We all went for coffee one day, and
Hmm.
I kind of asked her to stay. Can I have a word with her? But in a really nice way, so she didn't feel like point picked out or anything. And we just chatted, and she was lovely. And what it was, and I said, I kind of mentioned this to her, and she was so sorry. And she said it's because her boss was in the same group, and she was scared to speak in English because he would judge her level. And I didn't realize this was happening. So a little bit of empathy there, you know, would help. And so what I did after that was I kind of put them into groups and separated her from her boss a little bit, got them speaking all together in their groups. So she felt she was in a safe zone, and it improved tenfold. And she was so delighted. So that was great. And yet again, empathy, folk, trying to understand how people, keeping your radar open about how people are feeling in class, if they're enjoying it, watch their body language and stuff, and how they feel. I think focusing on what they like, what they enjoy, what they need, and kind of preparing your classes around them, and not, I'm the teacher, it has to be like this. So I think that's really important as well.
This isn't in the set questions, by the way. Sorry, it's just something I've thought of, so I'm not trying to shock you with it. As
Go for it.
someone, as someone who'd moved to the sort of greater kind of Madrid area, and as something, I mean, I guess we call them expats. Was was cultural awareness part of this sort of emotional intelligence kind of toolkit that you needed to kind of develop? Because generally speaking, I'm guessing you were teaching people English who were from the area. So did you need to learn a lot about the local area and a lot about how people were and about sort of the kind of cultural touchstones of the greater sort of Madrid kind of district and that kind of stuff? Was that important in terms of understanding students and that kind of how important was that in terms of teaching?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I was actually going to mention cultural, differences and stuff, and it's really
Hmm.
important. I mean, obviously there are cultural importance here in Madrid or in Spain compared to the UK. I mean, can you imagine a cultural difference in other countries that are further away? I mean, the importance is really key. And I mean, there were cultural differences here, just the way people speak to each other, the body language, and the way you do things. And I don't know, when I first started teaching here, because people weren't responding in the way would I would expect, like someone from the UK to respond, I wouldn't understand what was happening. There was something not right. And
Yeah.
as I got to, but I was really quite lucky because a lot of my friends were Spanish. So I involved myself around Spanish people, Spanish friends. And so I kind of learned quite quickly. And that was a big, big help. Just the rapport you get with each other and the way you say and do things. Politeness and behavior ways are different. And I remember sometimes thinking, oh, they're a bit rude, but it's not. It's just a different way of doing things. People are so different. And so when I learned all that, it was great, and it made things so much easier, and it connected me to people a lot more.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
really
that's a
important.
really That's a really insightful answer. Thank you, Thomas. So just because I think your route into teaching was a little unorthodox compared to a lot of the guests that we have on here. So you mentioned a challenge that you had before one of your groups in terms of one of the students was in the same group as their boss, which is a really interesting challenge. But was that the first challenge, the first real substantial challenge that you came up against as a TEFL teacher? Was there anything else that kind of came up in the first maybe 10, 15 lessons? And if so, how did you kind of overcome it? Because, I mean, in a real sense, you were kind of learning as you go.
I mean, there were lots of challenges. Every day there was a new challenge. Just trying to remember them all now. I mean, grammar was a challenge.
Hmm.
Phonology was a challenge. All of it. And I mean, I remember the cultural thing was a challenge as well. And I remember I had this student very early on. She was a private student, someone that kind of a friend of a friend that approached me. And her grammar was really good. And she knew a lot more grammar than I did. I mean, I didn't learn grammar at school. I didn't know about grammar at that time.
Hmm.
But in saying that, one of the things that even though we don't know grammar, we haven't learned the grammar per se, as a another tongue speaker, we
Hmm.
know what's right and what's wrong. We just know, but we don't know why, and we don't know the names of
Hmm.
it, the terms. So I had that, and she really knew all the terms. And I was clear to her at the start, and I said, look, I explained this to her, and she said, that's fine, we'll work together. And it was great because I was honest with her, and we helped each other, and we learned from each other.
Hmm.
And it kind of forced me into, I'd say, right, next day, what grammar do you want to have a look at and more in depth? And she'd let me know. And I'd go back and study it and plan my classes. And that's how I learned a lot of the grammar with her. And it was great. So, but I think teaching is like that anyway, no matter what it is. I mean, you learn from your students as well. It's not one
Hmm.
way. You learn from each other. And so it's a constant learning process. And that was great. Same with phonology. I mean, I didn't even know what it was. I was like,
Hmm.
what's that? I thought, oh. And, went away, got a book about it, read about it, studied it, and I learned a lot about phonology as well. And I think that's how you learn. Because I hadn't done a TEFL course at that time, you see.
Hmm. For the sake
So
of
I just
argument, if anyone's listening and they don't know about phrenology, how would you describe it to them?
phonology, yeah, I mean, phonology is, yeah, but then someone's going to say, well, that's not correct. There's all these kind of ways to describe it. Anyway, here we go. It's kind of the sounds of English, isn't it? It's all the sounds of English and how, how they sound, or any language, how they sound, and how the sounds change when they come together. That's it, sounds of English. And it helps with accents and stuff like that.
That works for me. That answer works for me.
It's
That's
actually a lot more deeper than that.
I mean, people will understand now. And say hypothetically, I wasn't quite sure what it meant, and I needed you to tell me. Let's say that hypothetically,
Well, for
not for the sake
example,
of
the
argument.
Scottish, I mean, phonetics, Scottish, we have a phoneme
Mm.
and it's the ch sound.
Mm.
And it's actually goes into two brackets, it's an X, and it's Loch
Oh, of
Ness.
course.
English people don't have that sound, so we have an extra sound in phonology. So there you go.
Oh, is it a sort of path thing as well? That kind of.
Yeah,
I'm gonna.
there's other
Yeah,
stuff we could really go into this. I mean,
we
it's just a
could.
little example, and that's a phoneme. That's one of the one sound in
Mm.
English, Scottish
Well,
English.
exactly. Well, don't say you never learn anything on this podcast. We'll take a quick break, and I'll be right back with Thomas Kerr.
Okay.
Back with Thomas Kerr. Now, Thomas, you, a person and a teacher, you're someone with a very distinct style. I've known that from the second that I met you. You're not like the others. It's a wonderful thing. Why you keep getting invited back to do podcasts with me. But I wanted to ask you about how you, because you're covered your route into teaching and how you became a teacher and the kind of teacher trainer that you are now isn't necessarily the most linear, traditional kind of progression. It's an interesting story. Again, if anyone's listening to this podcast and you haven't listened to Thomas's full podcast, I would recommend that you go back and listen to it. But how important would you say it is to develop your own teaching style, and how did you sort of come yours? Do you say you have a defined kind of style?
I don't really know. I mean, people say I have, but I don't feel as though I have. So I don't really know. I mean, I think what happens is I do remember when I first started out and I didn't really know, like I said before, I didn't know what to do or what to expect. And I, watched a lot of the other teachers, in the school. When I got a job in a school, I started watching other teachers and stuff. And I just developed my own personality. I think my own personality came out once I felt a bit confident. My own personality started to come out in the classes, and things that I felt were working for me with who I am and for the students. Another important part is as well, it's not just about the teacher's style, it's about your students as well. I like to find out, you can find out quite quickly actually. I'm quite intuitive, so I can find out quite quickly what makes my students tick, what makes them motivated, what makes them, things like that. That's important to help you to plan classes that are motivating, fun, and they help people want to learn. So I kind of mix that with my way of doing things, and it seems to work. I mean, for me, I want to motivate my students and make them feel happy and make them feel that they want to come to class. And so I keep my own mood out of it.
Right? Okay.
My own mood, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's like being in a theatre.
Mm.
The show must go on, and you go in there and you smile and you say, "Hi, everybody," and that's the way I do it. I've seen a teacher having a hard day and go in there, when I've observed, and the students can feel it, and they don't enjoy the class, and they don't really want to be there, and that's a shame because it's a waste of an opportunity. So I think as a teacher, you have to leave your worries outside the door and go in there and help your students with their English and try to have some fun while you do it. And I'll tell you what happens. It's like some kind of therapy. You go in there and you've got maybe a problem before you go in. And after 10 minutes, I've forgotten why I was worried before. I
Yeah.
just can't remember why I was worried. So it just kind of goes away. It's like going to the gym for an hour.
Yeah. That's
Just
amazing,
forget.
actually. I need to pick up on that because that's really interesting. So, I mean, this maybe sounds a wee bit pretentious, but it sounds a little kind of like method acting or something. It's something that switches in your head. I mean, do you kind of, there isn't like some kind of lofty process to this, and it just is something that happens. And I'm sure you're about to tell me, but how do you get into that mindset where you are able to kind of leave the world outside the classroom, whether it's virtual or in person, and just say like, right, it doesn't matter what mood I'm in, I'm gonna teach the way I always teach. Is there like a process?
No, I open the classroom door and it just starts.
Right, okay.
Just something to go, "Hi everybody,"
Yeah.
and that's it. And it just the magic start. It just happens. I
Hmm.
don't go away and think, right, try and set my head. It's just,
Hmm.
for me, I just open the classroom door and see all their faces sitting there, and the magic starts.
Hmm.
And they're,
Hmm.
that's it. And I just love it. And they're looking at me and they're like, "Right, what now?" And they actually, one of the things I like to do is I surprise them every time I walk in the door, there's a surprise. They don't know what to expect. So probably that's why they're looking at me. But I think they're looking at all teachers anyway to see what their mood is.
Yeah.
And so I walk in, and I mean, I'll do kind of daft things. Like, I remember this class I went in, and I just went in with 6 students, and I had six. I mean, I don't know if I said this before in the previous podcast. I don't think I did. But I
Mm.
remember this. I walked in with 6 balloons, floating balloons, and it
No,
was
you didn't
six
tell this.
students.
No.
And I walked in the door, and I had like kind of music playing, and they were like, "What's he doing now?" And I was just like, "How, you all right?" And I just pretended I didn't have the balloons. I was chatting to them, and they were looking at these balloons. They were teenagers, and they were like, "What are you doing with the balloons?" And I've got their attention. I've got their attention.
Hmm.
The mobile phones have gone. They're in the bags. I've got their attention. And I was like, "Well, in a minute we'll talk about the balloons." And I kind of did the homework with them, and the balloons were there very quickly. And then I said, "Right," and I let the balloons go. I said, "You've got to jump and catch the balloons now." And, and burst it and see what's inside it. And they were kind of jumping about. It's all right to jump about in class, and they were having kind of fun. And they got a balloon each and they burst it. And inside were instructions of what they had to do next for the start of the next part of the lesson.
Uh-huh.
And there's stuff like that just creates that rapport, fun, want to learn, and what's he going to do next day?
Hmm.
Rather than go in there and say, "Open your books at page 23. Today we're going to do the second conditional." I mean, it's really boring. I think so.
Well, I mean that leads me perfectly on to the next question because I was going to ask who were the sort of major influences on your teaching style. But it sounds to me, and this is maybe just a guess. I mean, maybe there are people that you observed, and you kind of nodded to that earlier, but the sort of kind of west of Scotland education, maybe the Scottish education in general, you'd probably describe it as quite dour. Certainly in the last, I mean, and maybe until, I don't know what it's like now. It's maybe different now, but it's certainly up until 2009, a lot of it was quite dour. And I just, certainly there weren't many balloons. My experience of Scottish education, I speak to yours, but I would assume it's the same. Were you kind of influenced more by what was missing from your own education as opposed to what you saw in your own school days, or were there people who influenced you when you took up teaching, or was it a mixture of both? Or I'm making assumptions here, but I mean, is it kind of
No.
a melting pot of different things?
I think it was two things that you just said. I think it was, I mean, there were people who influenced me, and at the same time, looking around what was happening in education. And I remember students, and I just remember in the beginning when I started teaching it in a school,
Mm,
and students, a lot of students didn't want to be there. And they're
hmm
like, oh, I have to come here because, my parents sent me, or because I need English for work. And I'm thinking, why do this is not right. This
hmm
is people need to. Learning is wonderful. Learning is amazing, and that's when I realized. And then just talking to them about how they're learning languages in their schools or how they learn languages in places before was really boring. And I just thought that's not motivating at all. And I don't think education needs to be like that. And I think that was an influence on how, that made me, how to make my lessons more fun, how to make people want to come to lessons, and how to motivate them to learn more. And I think that was important for me. At the same time, I mean, I remember this guy. I mean, he fascinated me. I used to work in this prestigious school in Madrid. I can't say the name.
No.
And I was there, and there was this guy, and he was really quiet. He was about 40. Julian, his name was. Anyway, he's not in Madrid now. And I remember he was so quiet, and he had all these really naughty group of teenagers, and they were really wild, these teenagers, and no teacher could cope with them. And he was the quietest voice, and he had them all mesmerized, and he was really quiet.
Mhm.
And it was just fascinating how he did it. And he told me secret once. And what he did was he used to play the guitar every now and again and sing with them in class. So they'd just
Oh.
break into song and sing songs, and that helped to keep them calm. So whereas I've
Mm.
got the balloons, they're all jumping around, he was the other side of it. And he would take his guitar in, and they would say, can we sing? And they said, well, let's do this first, this
Yeah.
serious work, and then we'll do some singing. And that's how he did it. And it was just
Yeah.
amazing. And that influenced me as well.
Yeah. And I think you've got to have a certain kind of I don't know if authority is the right word or charisma is the right word, but to be able to bring a guitar in and sing with a group of teenagers, you need to have a because you could get torn to shreds. Let's be honest. Like that could go seriously south unless you have a certain kind of something about you. So I mean, that's seriously like that's impressive.
But I think it's important that you sing songs that they like and that they
Mm.
know, and that's now. If don't sing an old-fashioned song that they feel silly with.
Yeah, of
So it has to be
course.
something that they like.
Hmm.
So
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Um, so here's an important question because kind of drawing on the last kind of what we've talked about for the last 5, 10 minutes or so, are you and have you been the kind of teacher that you thought you would be? When you kind of started out, did you have an idea of the kind of teacher that you would be, and have you stuck to that idea, or have you surprised yourself in a way that either you've developed certain things, or you maybe thought you're going to be one thing and you'd be more of the other? For example, you've maybe leaned more into kind of the sort of I don't know, the kind of the fun lessons and the interactive lessons. Have you maybe done more of that kind of stuff than you thought you would end up doing, or have you surprised yourself? You know that kind of thing.
I think, yeah, because I always thought before I kind of got serious about teaching, there you go, the education was kind of the serious thing, looking at books.
Yeah.
And it was the teacher transferring, or books transferring their knowledge onto you in a straightforward, boring way. That's
Mhm.
always what I thought education was. And that's the way I was kind of taught when I was at school. And when I started actually teaching myself and looking around and feeling how students were and looking at other teachers and just, as I say, I'm quite intuitive. And then I realized that this is not the way. This is not working. It's not going to happen like this. And that's when I realized that, I had to change things. And that's how I kind of started experimenting at first. I mean, sometimes it was nerve-wracking. I mean, I
Mhm.
remember I had this from a very, very serious, very conservative kind of a US, British, Anglo-American, what do you call it, auditing company. And it was business people, and they wanted me to teach them business English. And I just thought, and when I looked in the window, they were all sitting there in the classroom wearing their suits and things, really serious. And I thought, ooh. And you could tell they didn't really want to be there. It was just because they had to, for work and stuff. And I
Yeah.
thought, I'm going to try something. And this is a little bit dated, but I did this and it really worked. And I
Mhm.
thought, right. And I went in and I moved the chairs around and we played this game with musical chairs. All the teachers were saying, can we watch in the window? And I was like, well, yeah, but make sure they don't see. It's not going to work. And I was like, we've got to try and break the ice with these guys. So, so I went in there and I did this game with musical chairs with music. And at first they were like, and they kind of got up and then slowly they started taking their jackets off and stuff. And they really enjoyed it in the end after about, I had to keep them motivated.
Yeah.
And it set the pace, and it was like, that's it. And they were coming and they were smiling and they were a lot more open to learn, a lot more open to do different things. And it was really great. And they really loved the course. It made it more interesting for them as well. We didn't do music chairs every day, but
Yeah.
we did something fun every day. And I think that's, they also get that kind of stuff also gives people memory hooks as well to remember what they were doing that day and maybe remember the new language that they were learning that day. So it all helps them to remember as well and improve their English.
Brilliant. Thomas, that was a really insightful look at how you've developed as a teacher and how you've developed your methodologies and techniques. After this quick break, we're going to take a look at what other teachers can learn from you, your experience of teacher training, and have some great advice for prospective teachers. So
Okay.
back with Thomas Kerr. Now, Thomas, you've just told us so many great and fun stories about teaching. So I feel bad. I feel as if this next question is trying to sort of, I don't know, drag down the atmosphere a little bit. But, in the interest of being real, it can be really stressful. There's no getting around that fact. It's one of the more stressful occupations. I'm just asking you for your perspective on this. How do you kind of keep things on an even keel, if you like? What advice would you give to teachers who maybe struggle with stress or certainly in their early period of their career and they're finding things getting on top of them a little bit? What advice would you give?
I mean, there's lots of advice. One piece of advice is I know a lot of younger teachers who start teaching, and maybe their students are older than them, and they feel kind of a bit weird about teaching someone older. And they're like, oh, they know more about me. And I say to them, no, they don't. You know more about them than the language. It's your lesson. You're the teacher. Because they feel a bit kind of insecure because someone's older. And that's my advice. Remember, you know more than your student and they want to learn from you. You can learn from them too, but they want to learn from you. So, don't worry about going in there knowing remember that you are the teacher. So, be confident. Also, people get nervous, especially the first lesson. I mean, the first lesson. I mean, people are very nervous. Take deep breaths, be calm, keep your mind open to what's going to happen when you go in there.
Yeah.
Have really prepare your lesson plans, over prepare, have lots of activities, extra activities, because when you go in there and it's an hour lesson and the class goes really quickly, you eat up all the materials and you've got a half an hour left and you've got nothing left to do and you panic and that half an hour takes forever to pass. So have lots of activities until you are a really confident teacher and you can magic things out of a magic hat, because you can once you get confident. But so always have extra stuff in your bag for that, just in case. And very important is when you leave a lesson, first of all, think about what went well, what didn't go so good, how you could improve it, take notes, so you're constantly learning, and don't forget to pat yourself on the back and praise yourself for the things that went well in class, because you have to do that as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it's a job for the vast majority of people. I think it's also something of a vocation. You really have to care a lot. You give a lot of yourself as a person. So you're dealing with a lot of people on an interpersonal basis. And so I think for a lot of people that means not necessarily having the most healthy work-life balance. How do you maintain a healthy work-life balance, and how do you I have to be careful how I word this because I don't mean switch off as in not care about your students anymore, but how do
Yeah.
you attain, when work's over, you're able to sort of devote time to yourself and be able to kind of go, this is my time now, I'm able to do that.
Teaching is exhausting, and you're right. I mean, when you go in there and you teach, and it's not just out of the book, you're trying to motivate and everything. It's really exhausting. And when I leave a class, I'm mentally exhausted. And so it's important to to do other things. For example, I mean, I make sure I keep time for exercising every day. I keep time for exercising every day. That's important, to go to the gym or go running or something. Even if it's only half an hour, that's important.
Hmm.
In the morning when I have breakfast before classes, before, work starts, I take time for myself, and I, have my shower and I get ready, I'm calm, and I read or do something calm to start my day. And during the middle of the day, maybe I'll do some sport. And at the end of the day, take my dogs out for a walk. So get myself into the countryside, forget about everything. So those are the things. And also regular eating habits. What happens is, so you're not forgetting about yourself.
Hmm.
If you forget about yourself, you're not going to help your students,
Yeah.
because the flow has to keep going. And it's also important to have a regular eating schedule and eat well, because what happens is I've seen a lot of teachers maybe miss lunch because they're
Right.
running around, and that is not good, because that just projects some kind of negative energy, and that goes to your students, and it's not good for anyone. So I think keep yourself healthy, do some exercise every day, do something that makes you feel good, like reading or going walks with your dogs,
Yeah.
and make sure you have a regular eating habit and try to eat as healthy as you can. I went through a period, Coca-Cola and a Coke and a Mars bar
No, all right.
for
Okay.
lunch, because it was a period I was going through a busy time, and
Hmm.
it didn't work. It wasn't very long. I did it for about a month. I thought, no, this isn't working. And I'm quite a healthy person anyway, so it wasn't working for me. So I wouldn't advise that. So those are my pieces of advice about that.
Excellent. And you train teachers now. You're a fundamental part of what we do here at the TEFL Org. So just quickly, actually, before we go on to this next kind of next phase of questions, if you like, how did you kind of get into the other side of, well, if you like, how did you get into training teachers?
When I was teaching, when I started teaching, I realized I wanted to do, I needed to learn more if I wanted to continue this. So I did a TEFL course, and that, for me, that was life changing. I mean, and it's funny because when I did my TEFL course, I went back to London to do the TEFL course for a month, and I stayed at a friend's house, and I came back, and it was great because I had already been teaching before, and I kind of thought I knew a lot, but I knew there was a lot I didn't know, but I needed to know what was what. And the TEFL course showed me, I could see what I was doing right and what I wasn't doing right. And I learned so much as well. And that was really good for me. It was kind of revolutionary for me. And as I started teaching TEFL after a couple of years, I'm very inquisitive and I always want to know more. And, what's the next stage? What's the next stage? And I wanted to know what the next stage was. And then someone said, well, you can do like a diploma, and, that's a kind of teacher training thing. And I thought, yeah, I'll do that. So I did that. And for me, that was very challenging, really hard work. And I did that. And that kind of gives you a qualification. That opens doors for you to be a director of studies in, or lead a team of tutors in schools. So I started doing that. And then, of course, then the next stage after that, what's after that? What's after that? There's a master's in education, and then after that, a diploma in linguistics. After that, a master's education in leadership and management, as I started to deal with groups of other tutors, so I did the leadership management. As you develop, kind of tampered my studies to my development, all kind of went hand in hand. And that's kind of how where I got to where I am now.
Excellent. I thought it was important to preface that before we got into the next questions, just so when I ask you this, people understand. Like, oh yeah, of course he knows what he's talking about. And again, just a little kind of a disclaimer there that you should listen to Thomas's previous podcast. Yeah, very well told. You're a good storyteller, Thomas. But so when you're training teachers, then what early signs from an aspiring teacher make you think, yeah, this person has what it takes?
Yeah, I mean, when they're really open to feedback, any teacher, even
Hmm.
even when you've been teaching for years like me, always need to be open to feedback, and because we're always learning, it's non-stop. And so when someone's really open to feedback, wants to learn, wants to know new ways and different ways of doing things, someone that wants to develop themselves is open to feedback and help, that's when you can tell someone's going to be a good teacher. The bit about rapport and things, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, you get people who you think, wow, people have got natural rapport. And that, when I say rapport, I mean natural motivation and fun. They're great as well, but they also have to be open to, it's not enough. You also have to be open to feedback and to develop as a good teacher. So those are kind of the traits that you can see at the start that you think, wow, this person's going to be a really good teacher. In saying that, I've been surprised. I've seen people who were maybe at the beginning not open to feedback because I've realized because they were nervous or worried. But once I helped them with that, they got better and they become great teachers. So you never know.
No, that's very true. On that note, do you think there are teaching skills that can be, obviously, I mean, so many teaching skills can be taught, but do you think there are some that are just kind of natural, or do you think everything can be learned?
Um, I'm trying to think. That's such a. I mean, I think I learned a lot of things. I mean, like I said before, I know people who are very shy. Sorry, I'm going to change. I'm going to change what I was going to say there. I know people who
Sure.
are very shy, and they actually come out the shell with teaching.
Mm,
So they've learned to do that, and they've come out the shell because they've had to survive in a classroom of teenagers, and they've been like, wow, So I think you can learn a lot of things as long as you can learn most things as long as you're open to change and you're open to feedback and you don't mind experimenting and trying new things. But that's what teaching is anyway.
yeah.
So I think people can learn anything and develop. I really think that. I mean, I've seen people who have been, started teaching and people have said, oh, they're really shy and they're really in the shell, they're not going to be teachers. And they've turned out to be amazing teachers. So I think you can learn everything. I think so in teaching, I think. I mean, a lot of people are going to say, no, 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 but that's my personal experience. So what I'm trying to say to you guys out there, anyone can do this. You can
Yeah.
all do it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Look at that. In the spirit of being positive, I think I originally wrote this next question in quite a negative way, and so I'm just going to try and put a positive spin on it. What do you think everyone should know before they start a TEFL course?
Um, what they should know before they start a TEFL course, they
Mm,
should know that when you do a TEFL course with us, you have all the support you need. Do not worry. Don't
mm,
panic. Don't worry. Don't think, oh, I don't know all these things. I don't know all these things. That is so common. And thinking that you can't do it because you can. Everybody can, and we are all here to help you. And do not be afraid to get things wrong. Don't be afraid to think you've messed things up. You haven't. It's all a learning experience, and we all know that here at the TEFL Org. And contact your tutor. Contact me at support. By the way, when you write to support, I'm the one that I'll be there, for
nice.
you. So we'll do everything. Just shout for help. Tell us how you feel, and we'll do everything we can to take you through your TEFL course and help you to pass. That's what we're here for. So you're not on your own, you're not isolated, and don't think that asking for questions is showing any kind of weakness or anything, because people have said that. It doesn't. It shows strength, and it shows that you really want to learn something new. So, don't be afraid. We're here to help.
Cool. Thomas, what would you say is the most satisfying thing about your role in nurturing TEFL talent?
Definitely when you see people improving and developing and start to see people getting confident. That's a real biggie for me. When you see people all nervous and worried and think they can't do it, and then you start to see them develop and getting confident. And then when they move on to the next level and start experimenting, I mean, that's just amazing. That's just brilliant. That's very exciting for me, and it shows that I'm doing something right. So that's when I get to pat myself on the back and say, yeah, good, great. I love also when people come to me asking for help. When you get people saying, I can't do this. And I think any teacher who wants to teach love helping people. That's what we're here for. And that's really great. And another great thing is when you teach someone TEFL and you see them developing, and then they pass and they go away and they work. And a couple of years later, they come back and they contact you and they send pictures of you, of what they're doing and how they've developed, and how you've helped to mold and change their life, and how you've helped to get open doors for them and give them opportunities and to escape from the life that they had before that they wanted to change or move forward or whatever. It might not be escape. That is amazing, and it really makes me realize how important and how amazing my job is and how much I love it.
I cannot think of a better way to end the podcast than with that answer. So, Thomas, thank you so, so much for your time. I don't know if there's anything else you want to tell people before we wrap up.
Can I just tell you a little story about an 83-year-old lady from
Absolutely, you
Liverpool?
can. Yes, you can.
Just turned up. There was an 83-year-old lady from Liverpool who I taught, and her husband died and she wanted to do something different. So at 83, she went to an orphanage in Nepal to
Oh, wow.
teach. It didn't work out. It was a
Okay.
disaster. She came back. She did a TEFL course
Hmm.
with us, and she realized what she was doing wrong. And she went back to Nepal, and it was a massive success. She
Oh,
realized what
amazing.
she was doing wrong, and she loved it. And she goes back and forward to Nepal. I mean, I kept in touch with her for a few years, and she kept going back and forward and was loving it. And we kind of lost contact.
Oh, no.
And there you go, 83.
That's amazing. That's
Mm.
absolutely, I mean, imagine, yeah, wow. It just shows you what you're able to do with a TEFL certificate. It just like it's so so cool. Yeah, I wish we could. Honestly, there'll be another podcast in the future where it's just you tell me about the different students you've had, and maybe we'll use
Yeah, I
some
mean, I've got
names or
loads of
not.
stuff here to talk about, but there's just no time to talk about it all. So, in another podcast.
Definitely, definitely. You know I'll hassle you in the future about it. So look forward to that email. Thomas, it's been as ever, it's been fantastic talking to you. Thank you so so much. And I was going to normally I ask our guests where people can find you, but people can find you teaching through the TEFL org, and they can find you on the other end of the support line. So
Yeah, or my direct email, thomas@tefl.org as well.
yeah, brilliant. Well, from less sunny Glasgow to much sunnier Madrid, it's been a pleasure
Yeah.
speaking to you. And yeah, I'll chat to you soon, Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye, everybody.